There is no way that I have the time or the eloquence to explain what it means to me to be here. The board has been so gracious for 19 years to allow me to come and to study with you and to interact with you and to worship with you. And it is it's a staggeringly humbling thing to be able to participate in this. And I appreciate the board's graciousness. I appreciate the kind things that are said to me. And I just cannot express to you what an honor it is to be in your company and to study the Word of God with you. Words have meanings. Duh. But if you put the words in their right context, those meanings have nuance and they have depth. Sometimes we hear words and we even read them in Scripture, and if we don't connect them to some other things, they lose some of the impact. I like to watch Star Trek. I watched Star Trek when it was black and white. They had cardboard boxes with Christmas lights to make their special effects, and you could tell that Mr. Spock's ears were fake. Okay? My wife has seen so many Star Trek episodes that when the Enterprise comes around and you get those three little tones, she can tell you what episode it is. Now, you may not be a Trek fan, but they're remaking those movies, and they're using these young kids to be the new actors. And in the newest movies, you've got these young guys being Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. In one of those very first new movies, Leonard Nimoy, the original Mr. Spock, makes a guest appearance. And he runs into the young new actor that's playing Captain Jim Kirk. And he says to him, "I have been and shall always be your friend." That's a cool statement. But if you've seen 5 movies before that, the original Kirk and the original Spock, and Spock is standing behind that glass wall, and he's choosing to die to save everybody on that ship and to save his friend Captain James Kirk. And he does that thing he does with his hands, and he puts it on the wall, and he says, "I have been and shall always be your friend." Now, if you see it in the modern movie, it's cool. But if you've seen it in the history and then it comes back, that's a really, really neat, powerful scene in a movie. I moved to Huntsville in March of 1986. Tim Orbison moved there in June of 86. We worked together at Memorial Parkway for about 10 years. And then we worked together at Maysville for about 14 years. We worked in the same exact churches for 24 years together, and we still do projects together. We still visit. We still eat lunch. We still are involved in lots of things together. And Tim is one of my best friends. Tim and I make a great team. We're sort of like Kirk and Spock. He's a Star Trek fan too. Now, Tim thinks he's Kirk. He's Spock. I'm Kirk. Okay, just if you run into him, he needs to know that. Because of that connection, I've sent him some letters. I've sent him some emails. He's gotten cards from me. He's been given gifts. And invariably, I'll sign those letters. I have been and shall always be your friend. They talk about Travis Creasy, and they use the phrase friend and brother. You think about how many times you have an opportunity to be a friend with your brother. That's pretty cool. I had some custom-made knives made. I went to a company called ProTech. I asked them to laser engrave my little spider logo. That's the sticker on the back of my truck. I asked them to put 2 Greek words on it, philos and adelphos. They mean friend and brother. There are 4 of the silver-bladed knives in existence. friend and brother. Tim Orbison carries one of those knives. And when you understand the depth of meaning by someone who is not just my brother, but who is also my friend, or not just my friend, but also my brother, those two little words mean a lot when you tell someone is your friend and your brother. When John writes his gospel, John uses some particular words. He has a theme through the whole book of signs, belief, and life. And you'll find that combination. Someone will see a sign, they will believe. Someone will believe because of the sign. And John will talk about signs, belief, and life. But John will plant these little seeds or drop these little Easter eggs all through his letter that when you read them and you connect them, now you can read it without these connections and it's not wrong and you didn't misinterpret the text. But if you really pick up on some of the themes that John has, there's a depth of meaning. There's a nuance there. John chapter 1, verse 4. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it. The darkness does not overcome it. John's going to set up this pattern within the first 4 verses of his letter, and he's going to talk about this juxtaposition or this opposition between light and dark. And you look at the thematic, every time darkness shows up in John, it's bad. And John's going to say, hey, when you have light and you have dark, when dark meets light, light always wins. And John's going to have this theme of light and dark all the way through. In John chapter 13, after Jesus washes the disciples' feet and Judas leaves to go betray Jesus, John will say, and he went out, and it was night. A very small sentence, but has a depth of meaning when you know what John means when he talks about light versus dark. John also says this, John chapter 1, verse 12. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. Those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. John says, I want to talk to you about birth. Because see, if the light came into the world and you believe in his name, then you had the ability to become a son of God. And your ability to become a son of God has nothing to do with anybody else. It doesn't care who your father is. It doesn't care who your grandfather is. It doesn't care where you were raised. It doesn't care what culture you come from. If you have the privilege, if you have the right to be a son of God, it didn't come by the will of man or by flesh or by blood, but it came by the will of God. And your birth into the kingdom has nothing to do with other people. And your acceptance by God can't be judged or taken away by people. God gets to make that decision. And then John does something else to kind of prime the pump about what we're going to talk about tonight. In John chapter 2, look at verse 23. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover, during the feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs which he did, signs and belief. But Jesus did not commit himself to them because he knew men and had no need that anyone should testify of man, for he knew what was in a man. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. Now, John's told us that now Jesus is here at the Passover, and these people are believing in him because they've heard about the miracles or they've seen the miracles. But he says Jesus didn't commit himself to them because he knew all. And Jesus didn't commit himself to a man because he knew what was in a man. And there's a man named Nicodemus who comes to see him at night. You catch the depth here? John set us up. John wants us to understand that Jesus, he's pre-warning us. He's telling us, Jesus knows what's in a man. A man came to see him, and the man that came to see him was a ruler of the Jews. He's a Pharisee, and he came at night. And then Nicodemus introduces himself. This man came to Jesus by night and said, Rabbi, We know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Now, I think when Nicodemus says we, I think Nicodemus means the Pharisees. I think Nicodemus means the Sanhedrin council. God told Moses, you establish a group of men and you have 70 elders, and they kind of served as a function in Israel. After the intertestamental period and some of the things that happened with the Roman invasion of Jerusalem, the Jews ran their own religion differently. And they created the Sanhedrin councils, not anything authorized in the covenant, not anything in the Old Testament. It's their version of it. Every small town that had a synagogue had a lesser council, a small council of 23 people. The big Sanhedrin, the major council, had 71 people. That way you can't have a locked out vote. Nicodemus comes to Jesus not only as a Pharisee, but as a sitting member of the Sanhedrin council. And when he comes to Jesus, he says, we, my party, my council, my constituents, we believe that you're a man sent from God, because nobody can do the things you do unless God's with him. He's asking Jesus, hey, if you'll cooperate with us, if you'll give me a little something here, we can give you an endorsement. One of the views that some writers have about the purpose of the Sanhedrin was they were supposed to vet the Messiah. A guy comes up and says, hey, look, I'd like to be recognized as the Messiah. They'd sit down, they'd interview him. Nicodemus is offering this olive, and I don't really know if Nicodemus is a good guy or a bad guy at this point. I tend to lean toward bad guy because he comes at night. But he's coming to Jesus and he says, look, I'm here at night, and we'll give you some credit. There's things you do, and nobody could do these things unless God is with him. So we'd like to endorse you, but you got to play ball with us. Tell me. Now, I don't want it to seem like I'm being irreverent or being blasphemous, but you notice that Jesus answers him incongruously. He answers him out of context. I was driving through Atlanta late one night or early one morning, depending on how you look at it. It was 1 or 2 o'clock, and there's this radio commercial on, and it talks about it's good to get a discount on your car insurance, and it's good to get a discount, but there's some things you don't want a discount on, like brain surgery. And in the commercial, it says, how many fingers am I holding up? And the guy says, Thursday. Well, okay, discount brain surgery will do that for you. How many fingers? Thursday. That's not the answer to that question. So Nicodemus comes to Jesus and says, look, we believe that you're a teacher sent from God. Nobody can do the things you do unless God is with him. And Jesus says, Thursday. Jesus answered him, most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born again, he can't see the kingdom of God. That has nothing to do with what Nicodemus asked. Now, is Jesus a bad conversationalist? No. Jesus didn't need anybody to tell him about a man because Jesus knew what was in a man. Nicodemus is here and asks a question. Jesus answers his heart. We think, we'll offer you our endorsement. We think you're a teacher from God. Nobody can do the things you do. And Jesus doesn't say, well, thank you. Yes, I am from God. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you noticed the miracles. He doesn't say any. He says, listen, if you want to go to heaven, you got to be born again. That Greek word again is anothen. When I was at Harding University and they made us translate the Gospel of John from Greek into English, I ran into this Greek word anothen. And in the lexicon it says it can mean again, it can mean anew, or it can mean from above. I was unwilling to choose, so I said in my translation, Jesus told Nicodemus, you must be born again, anew from above. Because how do you get to be a child of God? Not from the will of flesh, not from the will of men, not from blood, but from the will of God. So Jesus tells Nicodemus, if you want to, I don't know what you think you came to talk to me about, but let me tell you something. Unless you're born again, you can't be in the kingdom. And it blows Nicodemus's mind. Nicodemus panics. Most assuredly, I say to you, unless one is born again anew from above, he can't see the kingdom of God. And Nicodemus said, how can a man be born when he's old? Can he enter again the second time into his mother's womb and be born? See, Nicodemus panics. Another thing that John's going to do is he's going to show several times that Jesus is talking about spiritual things and people lock their minds on earthly things. He'll talk to a woman about living water and her mind's in the bottom of the well. He'll talk about eating his flesh and his blood, and they're going to think about cannibalism, and he's talking about the Lord's Supper. And Nicodemus hears this statement, you must be born again, and he gets locked up, and I'm an old dude. I can't go back in my mother and be born. And he panics. Part of the reason he panics is because he knows this is an utter impossibility. And he knows it's an utter impossibility because he's rejoiced in the fact that people can't be born again. You see, in order to be a Jew, your dad had to be a Jew, your mom had to be a Jew, your grandfather had to be a Jew, your great-great-grandfather had to be a Jew, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather had to be a Jew, all the way back to Abraham. And so somebody could walk up to Nicodemus and say, hey, look, you guys on the Sanhedrin Council, y'all are so righteous. You obey the laws, you fast, you observe the Sabbath, you tithe, you have these great teachings handed down from Moses. You get to worship in the temple. I wish I could be like you. And Nicodemus would gladly say, you know what? You're very much able to be like me. It's simple. All you got to do is be born again. All you got to do is go back and be born a Jew. You know how many times he said that to people who wanted to be like, now you could be a proselyte, you could be immersed in water, and you could be circumcised. You still can come in the temple. You still weren't a full-fledged Jew. Nicodemus knows the utter impossibility of being born again. And when Jesus says, if you're going to see the kingdom of God, you got to be born again, he panics. How can this be? How can a man enter into his mother's womb a second time and be born? And Jesus answered and said, most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Nicodemus, if your trust, if what you rely on has to do with this stuff here, what you look like, what you sound like, who you're connected to, the group of people you're with, who your parents are, who your grandparents. Look, if you're going to put your trust in the flesh, then you're just flesh. If you're going to make these human evaluations, then all you'll ever be is human. But if you get connected to spirituality, if you get connected away from the earthly things into the spiritual realms, if you get connected to God, not through your rules, not through your regulations, not through your self-selected criterion, but if you get connected, then that which is flesh, that which is spirit, and there's a difference, and you need to know this difference. Do not marvel, this is verse 7, do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. He's like, don't panic about this. Let me tell you about the second birth. Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it. You cannot tell where it came from or where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. And Nicodemus, you're used to looking at people and judging them on some outward things. You're used to looking at people and look at how long their tassels are on their robe. Look at the phylacteries they wear. Look at how often they fast. Look at how many times they attend. Look at what they're doing on Sabbath. He says, you're used to all the... You ever notice the wind? See, the wind comes in and it'll move the trees. It'll move the leaves. It'll make the traffic lights move. You don't know where it came from. You don't know where it goes because you can't see the wind. You only see the effect of the wind. By the way, Greek word for wind and spirit, very similar. Jesus said it's the same way with the Spirit. So you want to measure how somebody's spiritual? It's not about the appearances you make at a building. It's not about the number of mission trips you go on or the number of retreats you attend. It's not about whether or not you won this, that, or the other at Lattice to Leaders. Being connected to God means you change inside. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit. That's hard to measure. As a youth minister, you can't sit down and grade your kids because it's a developmental thing. It's something that is a lifelong process, and kids can have it at this level and be okay, and they can have it at a greater level here and be okay. And it's all very subjective, but it's very precise because it's an inside-out issue, not an outside-in issue. And Jesus says, look, Nicodemus, don't marvel that I said you must be born again, because it's just like the Spirit is just like a wind. You don't know where it comes from, you don't know where it goes, but you see its effect. I can look at your life and tell whether or not you're spirit, because I can see the effects: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And you can be a regular church attender and not have those things. The rich young ruler looked great on paper, but he was hollow as a chocolate bunny. Jesus says, Don't you marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes. You hear the sound. You can't tell where it comes from. Can't tell where. That's just like everybody who's born of the Spirit. And Nicodemus answered and said, how can these things be? He's panicked. He's blown away. He came thinking that he could do something for Jesus, and Jesus has told him, I'm asking you to do something radically different than you've ever expected. And right now, Nicodemus thinks it's an impossibility. How could this be? And then Jesus says, are you the teacher of Israel and do not know these things? You talk about being humbled. Nicodemus, you're supposed to be the teacher of Israel. And you don't know this? This is elementary stuff. How can you be in a position to be on the council and be a Pharisee and not get this? Are you the teacher of Israel and don't know these things? Most assuredly, I say to you, we speak what we know. And we testify what we have seen, and you do not receive our witness. When Jesus says we and our, I think he's talking about God the Father, God the Spirit, and God the Son. How many times have we given you the information you needed to know? How many times have we told you this more about relationship and not about ritual? Ritual without relationship builds rebellion. But if you got to have both, spirit and in truth, he'll say later to a lady that he talks to at a well. He says, we, the Father, the Son, and Spirit, we've borne witness to you. We've sent our prophets to you. We've sent angelic messages to you. We guided your people through. We gave you all kind of information, and you didn't pay attention to it. You didn't accept it, and you didn't believe it. If I have told you earthly things, and you do not believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things? Jesus said, how can I expect to even have this conversation with you? If you can't get this, there's no way you'll get that. If you don't know your alphabet, you can't read. And Jesus says, you're missing some elementary, basic, fundamental concepts. If I've told you earthly things and it blows your mind, I can't even start to talk to you about heavenly things. No one has ascended to heaven, but he who came down from heaven, that is the Son of Man who is in heaven. Nicodemus, your idea that you can give enough tithe, or you can rest enough on the Sabbath, or you can fast enough, or you can quote the law, or quote the rabbins, or that you can do all. He said, the idea that you can do all this stuff to the point that you ascend to a higher spirit. Nicodemus, nobody's ever gone there. Nobody's ever reached the point where they ascended into heaven. But the Son of Man was in heaven and descended. I'm telling you the things that I know because I'm from there. I'm not from here. My power's not earthly. My sonship is not earthly. It's all about spirit. And I was there, now I'm here. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. See, Israel had this fundamental problem that they had an indirect relationship with God. In the very earliest days of Sinai, God comes to the mountain and the Israelites say, that's scary, we don't like it, we'll hide in our tents. You talk to God, find out what he wants, and then you tell us. They always had an indirect relationship with God. Every time they got in trouble, Moses intervenes and takes care of the problem. But one time, Moses puts a brass serpent, and the people had to come out of their tents, and they had to approach the serpent, and they had to look at it. Nicodemus, the time is coming when your relationship with God is not going to have anything to do with your rituals, not going to have anything to do with your pedigree, not going to have anything to do with whether or not you're an Israelite. You're going to have to come to the Son of God. You're going to have to look upon him, and you're going to have to believe, and that's when you become son. That's when you become in a relationship with God. You're going to be reborn, water and spirit. You're going to be baptized. Nicodemus, this is very, very important. Because the relationship that you have to have with God has to be your relationship, and it can't be based on anybody else. It can't be based on your mom or your dad or your grandparents. It can't be based on your congregation. It can't be based on your Christian school. It can't be based on your boyfriend or your girlfriend. It's going to have to be you. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so even so the Son of Man must be lifted up. It's not wrong to sing the song, lift him up, but the idea of lift him up is not exalt him, it's crucify him. When you sing that song, please understand when Jesus said, and I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. He's not talking about being glorified. He's talking about being crucified. It's the only way for us to have peace with God is for him to come and be crucified. And if he's lifted up, in the same way that the serpent was lifted up, the Son of Man is going to be lifted up. You're going to have to look at that in order to be saved. Anyone who believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. The relationship that God wants with us, the relationship that God intended for us, is not one of condemnation. We are imperfect people. I'm an imperfect person. I married an imperfect person. We gave birth to an imperfect person. We go to church with imperfect people. Why are we shocked when people behave imperfectly? Why do we split churches when someone behaves imperfectly? Why do we call for the resignation of an elder when an imperfect man acts imperfect? Why do we fire a preacher when an imperfect man acts like an imperfect man? God looks at us and says, look, I don't know what you're ashamed of. Oh, God knows I don't. I don't know what you're ashamed of. But God says, whatever it is you're ashamed of, whatever it is that makes you feel insecure, whatever it is that makes you feel inadequate, let me tell you something. I love you, period. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. God's not in the business of trying to find out all your imperfections. He already knows them. And in spite of knowing your imperfections, he sent the Son to die for us so we wouldn't be condemned. Quit being ashamed. Quit feeling inadequate. The basic component of human existence is connections. And the reason we don't connect with other people is because we feel ashamed. And when we feel ashamed, we hide from other people, and we're disingenuous, and we're fake, and we're hypocritical. But when we learn that God handles our imperfections and we forgive each other's imperfections, and that Jesus came because we were imperfect. If we could be perfect, we wouldn't needed him to come, but he came because we were imperfect. And Jesus tells Nicodemus, look, you don't understand some things, and you're not mature in your thinking right now, and you don't get some spiritual things, but God loved you. And he sent his Son so you could live forever. And God didn't send me here to condemn you, but God sent me here so you'd have everlasting life. He who believes in him is not condemned. Nicodemus, it's not about your insecurities. It's not about your imperfections. It's not about the things you're ashamed of. If you believe, you won't be condemned. God's not in that business. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. He said it really starts in whether or not you believe I'm God's Son. It really starts and stops as to whether or not you invest in me or want me to invest in you. And you came here with the wrong agenda. And this is the condemnation. That light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. And everyone who practices evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen and that they have been done in God. If you've shown up at Jesus' apartment at night, and Jesus says, here's the condemnation of the world. Here's what makes people bad guys. This is what's wrong with the world. That the light came and men loved darkness more than they did light. And people who skulk around in the darkness live in the darkness because they don't want their deeds exposed. But anybody who's truthful and authentic and vulnerable gets out into the light, because then their deeds can be fully. If you've come to Jesus' apartment to talk to him and it's at night and he has this conversation with you, how are you feeling right now? Nicodemus feels shorter than I am. He feels about this big, because Jesus has confronted, he knows what's in a man. Nicodemus, don't come in here at night and tell me who you think I need to be. I need to tell you who you need to be. You need to be born again. And this is the condemnation of the world, not just that people don't believe in me, but the condemnation of the world is people are afraid to stand in the light. We're afraid to be authentic. We're afraid to be vulnerable. And we hide behind masks. And we hide behind being disingenuous, and we hide behind hypocrisy, and we hide behind all kinds of things because we don't want anybody to know that we might be weak, or we might have stumbled, or we might have made a flaw, or we might have made a mistake. So we get over in the light, we get out of the light into the darkness. And that's how Jesus ends his conversation with Nicodemus. And I don't know if Nicodemus left there condemned or convicted. I really don't know if Nicodemus is a good guy or a bad guy at this point. Now, later on in John 7, the council is talking about Jesus, and Nicodemus will kind of tentatively say, hey, look, it's against our law to condemn a man without trying him. They tell him basically to shut up. Are you a Galilean too? So Nicodemus is moving, but 3 years later. Now, that's an assumption. Jesus does not start his personal ministry until he's 30, and we are given records in the Gospels about 3 Passovers. The Passover is an annual feast, and assuming there's not a Passover that they don't write about, then we have 3 Passovers later, Jesus is crucified. They arrest him at night, which is against their law. They try him before the Sanhedrin at night, which is against their law. They condemn him to death without a unanimous decision because Joseph of Arimathea does not vote with them. And then they take him from the Jewish part to the Roman part, and they put him in front of a Roman governor, and they give him a public beating and a public trial and a public condemnation. And they march him through the streets publicly, and somebody, Simon of Cyrene, has to carry his cross. Now, your Bible never says that he fell down. We don't know why he carried the cross. The assumption is he fell down, but your Bible doesn't say he fell down. Find it if you can. Show it to me. But they walk him through the streets, and they walk him outside the city of Jerusalem, probably about 650 yards to a bare rock called the Skull, the Golgotha. A lot of people think that's a rock quarry. You've ever had rocks quarried around your neighborhood or whatever? They leave those bare rocks. A lot of people think that that's where they got the stones to build the temple. The stone the builders rejected is crucified in the rock quarry. That's not an accident. That's not a coincidence. And they publicly execute him so that people can walk by and look and see him, and he hangs on that cross. They don't hang him and break his neck with a rope. They don't behead him. They hang him on a cross, and he's there for 6 hours. And the people who are walking by and shaking their fist and wagging their heads, they're on this side, and the people who are laying at the bottom of that cross and crying their eyes out, they've been identified as followers of Jesus. And Jesus dies. John chapter 19, verse 38. And after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate gave him permission. So he came and he took the body of Jesus. And Nicodemus, who at first, you notice that invisible tense change? Who at first came to Jesus by night, also came and bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. And they took the body of Jesus and bound it in strips of linen with the spices, as is the custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. So there they laid Jesus because of the Jews' preparation day, for the tomb was nearby. You got a guy who starts out at night, and he's ashamed, and he's duplicitous, and he's hypocritical, and he's disingenuous. And after this encounter with Jesus, when he talks about a new birth and becoming a son of God, and his deeds not being in the light, but his deeds were in the dark, he comes out of the dark and into the light, and they approach the Roman governor and say, hey, by the way, that criminal you just executed, we'd like to give him a decent burial. We're his people. You know how hard that would be? To identify yourself as, hey, the guy you just killed for what he's doing, I'm one of those. Matt Hupel and I were talking between sessions. He said, can you imagine being the guy to take the body of Jesus off the cross? They go beg Pilate for the body, and they either put the cross down or they just pull him off the cross, and you've got to pull the hands of Jesus off those nails. And then you carry that beaten, bloody body publicly to a place to bury it. That's a big difference from sneaking around in the dark to now publicly acknowledging Jesus. Whatever's going on with Nicodemus, in 3 years he's changed. In 3 years, he's no longer ashamed. He's no longer insecure. He's no longer afraid. And he comes out of the darkness and into the light and claims the body of Jesus. I don't know what's going on with you. Typically, young people are afraid these days. I don't know what you're ashamed of. I don't know why you feel inadequate. I don't know why you never feel good, or even if you feel good, you don't feel good enough. I don't know what it is that you've done and whispered, and Satan's whispered in your ear that says you can't ever get over it. I don't know whether you're just afraid to let people know you're one of them. But Jesus says if you'll get out of the darkness and step into the light, you become a son of God. I don't know what your insecurities are. I don't know what your vulnerabilities are. I don't know what you're ashamed of. But Nicodemus left the darkness, stepped into the light, and claimed the body of Jesus. And all we're challenging you to do this weekend, listen to what Reed says. Listen to what Chris says. Pay attention to your youth ministers and listen to your parents and your elders, and whatever it is that think you're inadequate, the thing that makes you ashamed, the things that makes you afraid, just leave that behind and step out of the darkness and claim the body of Christ. Don't let fear hold you back. Don't be ashamed. Step out of the darkness into the light and claim the body of Christ. Let's pray. Father, help us to not be ashamed. Help us to give our weaknesses and our vulnerability. Help us to be truthful about our weakness and just give it to you so that we can step out into the light. Father, bless these young people. Help them to make a decision that is life-altering and change them for eternity. Father, thank you for the story that John recorded and the way that he did with his emphasis. Thank you for the courage of Nicodemus to come out of the darkness. Father, bless these young people as they study, as they worship, as they pray. Father, help us this weekend to grow close to one another only as we grow close to you. Father, bless us this weekend. Help us to be brave enough to be unashamed to claim your body. In Jesus' name, amen.